Hello, everyone. Welcome to another astrology forecast. I'm Dr. Claire Moon of Aligning Light Astrology, and we're going to be talking about the first 2 weeks of April 2024. So, for those of you who are joining me for the first time, hello, welcome. There's a chat over to the right-hand side of your screen. If you are coming on back, thanks for joining us yet again, everyone. I'm going to start off with, I'm trying to do a little bit more reflection. So we'll start off today talking about a little bit of March, where we are right now, and then we'll move into some of the main focuses for the first 2 weeks of April. One of which is, of course, the second eclipse on April 8th. And there's a bunch of benefic enclosures, malefic enclosures of the moon this month. At least in these first 2 weeks, I was writing up my report and I'm like, this whole report is just a lunar enclosure report. I feel like half of what I'm going to say today is like enclosure of the moon, enclosure of the moon. And I think the quality that is really going to impart on this first 2 weeks of April is kind of this roller coaster quality, not to doomsay and not to make it like sensationalist, like, oh, tune in, it's going to be crazy. But it's not that often that I see enclosures like this oscillating between malefic and benefic, and so many of them and in quick succession. That's the part that I don't see. Like there might be like one a week, not like two every week. So yeah, that'll be a big part of today. Jupiter is moving in on Uranus, so within 3 degrees, closing that final gap in the engagement of Jupiter into Uranus. So we'll be talking about that today. But before we get to those things, let me get my notes prepared. Um, Hello, Breeski. Welcome back. And if you do have any comments, please feel free. I try to keep up with the chat as best I can. I'm less great with it during the forecast versus my monthly question and response sessions, which are the second Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. Central Time. But yeah, and if you have questions, if there's any kind of configuration that I didn't cover or that I didn't mention, there's always going to be time to ask me about those at the end as well. But also just let me know if there's anything I'm skipping over that you wanted to discuss today, because of course this is never all inclusive. I guess just to do our dates of interest really quick while we're talking about it. So dates of interest for April, on the 1st of April, we have Mercury stationing retrograde. So we'll have our thrice annual retrograde discussion. On the 4th of April, we have Venus entering into Aries. On the 8th, we have our solar eclipse in Aries. Venus is also going to begin their descent into the beams of the sun. So we'll talk about that and visibility things. There's a Mercury Cazimi or Mercury Sun conjunction on the 11th of April. And that's where our discussion will end today for the most part, is that first 2 weeks. But then the rest of the month, we've got on the 19th, the sun entering Taurus. On the 20th of April, Mars entering Aries. On the 21st is about when Mercury is going to start rising in the morning sky. We've got a Scorpio full moon on April 24th. April 25th, Mercury stations direct. April 28th, Jupiter is going to start disappearing in the evening sky. And then at the end of the month, on the 29th, Venus is entering Taurus. So there's a lot. I'm extra thankful that I've broken this up into two parts, because April is large and in charge in terms of stuff to talk about. So let me see if there's any other kind of beginning announcements. I don't think so. I'm doing readings. So if you do like, granted, when I'm in consult, I'm not talking like this usually. I'm not being so technical. Excuse me, I'm not being so technical. But I do readings. You can always book at aligninglightAstrology.com. I have a sliding scale. If you are oppressed by our society, if you are having financial challenges, pretty much the list is long. So go to my website, go to the frequently asked questions section, and I go over all of the details, all about the sliding scale. So if that's you and you want astrology, but you maybe don't have the means right now, that can help. So I don't want money to get in the way of astrology. And also, it's my way of giving back. So please check out the sliding scale, see if you qualify. No questions asked. And it does say on the website, But if you want to book with me through the sliding scale, you've got to email me at aligninglight@gmail.com. I am having a paper come out. I can finally say it because it's like out in the wild, but it's with the CAELi review, which is an astrological journal. And I got published talking about empty houses. So if everyone has one pretty much, unless, you're using like every single asteroid out there, most of us have an empty house. It's one of the most common questions that I get when we're getting into birth chart discussions, especially is, oh, what does it mean if I have an empty house? So I'm writing all about it in the CAELi review. It's CAELi. It's the Celestial Arts Education Library Institute. Am I getting that right? And it's in the Pacific Northwest. It's an actual place, but they have a website and they have a journal. So check that out. I'll be linking all of the stuff below eventually. It's on my social medias. Let's get to it. Let's start with some reflection. So I'm going to get this chart up here. Let's see. So right now, as I record this, we have Leo rising, our beautiful exalted sun in Aries just passed over the midheaven not too long ago. And I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. As you can see, I'm in the central time zone. So a lot of what I talk about today is, timing wise, probably going to be pretty centric to my little experience here in the central time zone. But I'm trying more and more and more to work in like, hey, if you're in, more around like Greenwich Man time, universal time, or more globally east, like when are these things going to hit you? Because some transits happen when some parts of the world are asleep. And I consider that like certain transits, I'm like, oh, sweet, I'm going to be asleep for that. I don't have to deal with that. But some of us are like trying to get to our job in the morning. So I'm trying to kind of sort that out a bit. And I guess last little housekeeping thing, the best way to use this information today. So if you have a birth chart, for instance, and there's a Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, that is a different conversation than talking about Mercury retrograde by transit. And while, of course, there is overlap, and of course, we can take some of the same themes that we're talking about in terms of transiting retrograde planets, it's a different situation when you have that in your birth chart and you have your entire life to work on those things, to get familiar with those energies and figure out how to best wield them and use them. The rest of us, we might not have that the same time to get our hands or our heads around it. So if I'm saying things that you're like, hey, I've got a Mercury retrograde in my chart, does that mean I'm an F up? It's like, no, my dear friend, no, it does not mean that. But the best way to use this information, though, is to know your rising sign. So today, if you can, if you already know your rising sign, great. If you don't, go to like astroseek.com, astro.com, astrodeans.com, Channy Nicholas's app, and put in your birth data and find out what your rising sign is. Now, if you don't have your birth time, where I'm not going to get into it, that's on my FAQ section of my website as well. If you're wondering what to do about that, go explore. Try to find that out if you can. But once we have the rising sign established, then we know, okay, if I'm having Virgo transits, it's going to hit. If you're a Leo rising, it'll be more in your money place. If we're talking about Pisces, Aries for a Leo rising, that would be more 8th house topics, 9th house life topics. That's how we can then place these transits and what they're doing more specifically, like, okay, there's a Mercury retrograde, it might cause interruptions. Where in my life is it going to be most likely to cause interruptions? That's how we best use this information today. And with that, I think we're ready to get into some reflection points. So I'd already mentioned, one of the big themes that I'm wondering about, I've been looking forward to this, is Jupiter and Uranus coming together. As I'm speaking now, they're not quite within the engagement range of 3 degrees, but very soon they will be. And that just means within 3 degrees, that kind of relationship between those planets, we're going to see those archetypes and themes come out more and more vividly, more apparently, more noticeably, basically. So with Jupiter, we have themes of learning, growth, expansion. And with Uranus, it's sudden growth, sudden opportunity, sudden expansion. unexpected expansion growth opportunity. This can be also an interruption, maybe, in some Jupiterian things. I can imagine stability and having some kind of slight interruption. Now, it could be, in that way of certain opportunities, certain solutions, certain ways of reconciling something might be disruptive, but it's still like a good thing or a favorable thing. So there's lots of possibilities there when we get these two planets together. But we'll be talking about that more as we get into the details. But I just want to point that out. That's in the Taurus part of our charts. So where that may be unexpected learning, unexpected understanding, unexpected growth or opportunity, all of that might be happening in the Taurus part of our chart, showing something there. That's going to be the case all month, essentially. And then there is, and now this is more toward the last half of the month, but I'm going to say it now just because I think it's important. Knowing that we've got quite a few planets. This is more like April 20th. What? That's too far. We're going to start to get planets that we can see. Quite a few of them in the morning sky. So like toward the last half of April, if you're wanting to do some observational astronomy stuff, the further we get toward the end of April into May, we're going to have a pretty happening morning sky. The morning sky before the sun rises. We'll be able to see several planets. So check that out if you would like. Look to the east. Wake up in the wee hours. Let's actually look when it would be. Yeah, so like, yeah, it's like 5:30 in the morning Central Time, so it's early for I think most of us. But if you want to get up early, you'll be able to see some stuff. Um, those are my big things. I guess looking back a little bit more, we did just have that eclipse. So I tell you what, like right now, we still have a Scorpio moon. We've been having a Scorpio moon. I personally have been exhausted. I think a lot of people have been exhausted as far as what it sounds like online. A few days before that, a couple days before that, I should say, on the 25th, we just had our eclipse. It's a lunar full moon eclipse, only visible in certain parts of the world. Not everyone could see it. But really affecting the Libra Aries part of our charts. It may have just been a really busy few days in those topics that are described by Aries and Libra for us. But overall, the eclipse times, they're not super stable. I'll talk about that more once we talk about April 8th and that second eclipse. But I think, just knowing this first 2 weeks of April, most of that is in this eclipse portal in between eclipse time. Hydrate, take care of yourself, do all the stereotypical self-care things that we all know we're supposed to do and we kind of put off. This is a good time to actually do those. And as we move into, Mercury's already been in its pre-retrograde shadow. So as of, when was it? I thought I wrote it down here. Yeah, March 18th. Since March 18th, we have been in the pre-retrograde shadow. I've been able to tell. There's been several things that have been going on that have felt very Mercury retrograde to me already. Just poor communication or miscommunication or, just stuff going awry that really, it's like, really, this is what's going wrong right now. I've already been noticing those things and surely it will just ratchet up. But that started March 18th. So Mercury's already slowing down. When Mercury's going its fastest, it's usually going about 2 degrees a day. So how fast is Mercury going right now? Yeah, they're only going about 1 degree a day as we get to, oh yeah, they're not even. Yeah, so we're at 26 degrees right now with Mercury, and they're going to be stationing at 27 degrees. So Mercury is really slow right now. Mercury is a planet of communication, travel, logistics, buying and selling, any kind of exchange, listening as much as speaking. Mercury's in charge of all of that. When Mercury slows down in the sky, those types of things can too start to slow down, maybe not work at the same pace or in the same quality that we're used to. So Mercury is getting ready to stop moving apparently in the sky and start moving in the other direction. That whole sequence, I guess, now we're just kind of getting into the details accidentally here. Mercury retrograde officially stationing on the 1st. It will station direct on the 25th of April at 15 degrees of Aries. So 27 degrees of Aries is where they'll start. They'll go back to 15 degrees of Aries. And that's going to take us all the way till pretty much the end of April. So April 25th. And then after April 25th, we'll spend a little bit of time retracing some of these same degrees. So we're really looking, post retrograde phase. We're looking at, mid-May. So just looking at April as a whole, especially in the Aries parts of our charts, the house topics that have to do with Aries, for the Mercury ruled topics of our chart, so Gemini, Virgo, all of the house topics in Gemini, Virgo, Aries, those topics of life may be getting rearranged, reconsidered, rethought out, resorted in the month of April, really going into May, getting wrapped up and hopefully reconciled by mid-May, at which point we should be able to see this stuff in the rear view mirror. So that's kind of our Mercury timeline. Mercury will do their rebirth in the heart of the sun. That's, again, Mercury Cazimi is going to be on the 11th of April. So really the middle point of the retrograde journey, I would say. And in Mercury's whole cycle with the sun, that is a rebirth moment. So we'll be talking about what that means more symbolically, but just to give us the timeline, all the Mercury things and Mercury touched things, we need to just be open-minded with, open-ended with, if possible, give room for changes, give room for revisions or redoing or rethinking. And it's like, so I guess let's just get into it, this conversation of Mercury retrogrades, how much doomsaying is appropriate here. I guess on the not doomsaying side of things, they're very natural. They happen 3 times a year. Mercury is the fastest moving planet. A lot of their symbolism of being how they are comes from the fact they're doing this dance with the sun all the time. So Mercury being the psychopomp that can go to the upper and the lower worlds. Mercury being the psychopomp that is one of the few that can talk to God, all of these gods that other people, in the pantheon, other gods in the pantheon don't have the ability to go around and just have those relationships with all these people. I mean, just the fact that they're doing too, when a planet disappears in the beams of the sun and we can no longer see them, this itself, this traveling in under invisibility is sort of an underworld experience for our planet in a lot of ways. So Mercury doing that process so regularly makes them sort of the most qualified to do all those roles as psychopomp, communicator, traveler extraordinaire. So a lot of this is just really natural. I think too, a natural way that Mercury being our cognitive thinking logical faculties, and how it is healthy to have those things changed and updated regularly, like our views and our judgments about things, and Mercury being able to be flexible about mind, flexible in views. I think that's a really good thing about Mercury retrograde. Not the last one, although I feel like I learned everything new about my software during a Mercury retrograde, but a few times ago, what was it? It was this function here. This is becoming an Astro Gold tutorial, but this little like flip-floppy function, you can switch charts. And it blew my mind. And I always learn stuff like that during a Mercury retrograde. Cleaning up stuff that you already started, going back and revising things that have already been created and you want to continue to exist, but they need changing, like a website. all like revisions, all of those things are literally great to do. Cleaning out closets during a Mercury retrograde. But when we're thinking electional astrology, inceptions, beginnings. Now, if you, dear person with a birth chart with Mercury retrograde in your birth chart or some other retrograde planet in your birth chart, you too are an inception. You too are a beginning. Like we all had our beginning. That's our birth chart. So does that mean that like, oh no, there's something wrong with you? Because, I'm not going to choose to buy a car with the same type of sky if I could avoid it. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. We need, like, as you've been hearing, we need that retrograde process to be healthy, to be natural in the world and nature, to have our flexibility and our minds to be updated and, rebooted, cleaned out. We need people like that too, very much in society. What would we do if we didn't have the retrograde folks doing things differently, right? So this is why we do things differently, keep our minds open to doing things differently during an eclipse. The more we hold on to plans or ideas not during an eclipse, during a retrograde. Well, maybe during an eclipse too, where we hold on to a certain plan, a certain idea of how things are going to go. Life's going to be harder. There's going to be more tension in our lives if we can. And this is what I mean when I say align with the light. It's like if it's a retrograde, I'm going to be retrograde-y. I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to try things differently. I'm going to be open-minded. But yeah, like, okay, let's say I want to like send a fax to my bank for a car loan. I mean, that's a pretty black and white, algorithmic, material world, boring thing. Mercury rules over like so much of that process. Ideally, this is not where Mercury retrograde is going to do me a lot of favors. So when I'm talking about like, oh, don't do this, don't do that during a Mercury retrograde, a lot of it has to do with like the 3D material world of things and where it's like, yeah, actually the best thing for everyone would be if there was a straight going from point A to point B. And what happens during a retrograde time is there's no point A to point B. There's like a point in between there. Then there's circuitousness, and there's having to do more than one step, more a second action or even a third action in order to complete the thing that was initially started. And that is like an old electional astrology rule. So this is why, again, is it a bad thing if you have to do extra steps? No. Congratulations, you just built spiritual virtue and patience and resiliency. But most people, if we can avoid, so it's like, I think there's enough things in the world right now having us having to exercise patience and resiliency. I don't need to do it with the fax machine as well. And so I shall use astrology for when I send a fax. So those are my thoughts in a nutshell on retrogrades. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to check in with this chat real quick. This has been a kind of a nebulous introduction here. Hello, Reverend Kai. Hello, Lisa. Welcome back. Hello, Michael. Welcome back. We got a lot of familiar faces here. Hello, Anna. Hello, Clarkson. Oh my goodness. Anna says Mercury retrograde, being an F up or not, is open to interpretation. Yeah, we have a good sense of humor here. Thank you. Um, mm. Priesky, you say you have no empty houses. How many planetary points you got in there? There's got to be at least one, right? Using only visible planets. Using only visible planets. Because I'm that old-timey rock and roll type lady. Yeah, not that I use the outers, but peace to the universal family. Yeah. Thank you. That's so nice. All right. Oh, that's a good note to, let's see. Okay, I'm just going to read this again. Dates of interest. Okay, here's our plot points. We're going to talk about the retrograde, Venus's ingress, the eclipse, the Cazimi, and that's pretty much it. And all the enclosures, and that should do it. Okay. Yeah, let me just share my screen for a second just to show you this whole lunar enclosure business. So this was March. We had a few. We had a few. The yellow, if you can see colors on your end, yellow are the malefic enclosures. The blue are the benefic enclosures. Not all, and what an enclosure is. So that is when the moon in this case is getting its last applying aspect was a malefic, and its next applying aspect is a malefic or a benefic. And you can imagine that planet being hugged by two rays of light from those other planets. So it's like imagine getting, I always use the analogy of like, imagine getting a hug from two aunties that you really love, like getting squished between two people you love versus like, two big like WWE, like the wrestlers like Mankind and like The Undertaker, and then getting squished in between them or something. Like one of those is more pleasant if we want to use that imagery. So malefic enclosure of the moon, benefic enclosure of the moon. For April, we can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them total, just in the first 2 weeks. And, like for instance, here we can see like April 12th, April 14th, and then the one on April 27th. These are all, malefic enclosures. But what was interesting to me too, so it doesn't have to go between like a happy one, a not happy one, a favorable one, an unfavorable one, advantageous, unadvantageous. But here it does. Here we're very much kind of going in between. It's like merp, 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 just back. Like it's very roller coastery to me. Kind of going in between these energies of stability, the conditions for growth, help, affection, joy, and then going to these energies of intensity, hard work, motivation, discipline, strife, struggle. Like, yeah. So if you're feeling, and okay, if you are, maybe you're not like a Cancer rising. If you're a Cancer rising and you're like literally the moon, I would expect you to feel these things more if you are in like an annual profection year where the moon is your lord of the year, like you're in a Cancer annual profection year or any other place where the moon is activated, you might be noticing these things more. So just so you know, it's like in Buddhism, we call it like the vicissitudes of life, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, repute and disrepute. It's like, yep, everything changes. Yeah, even fortunes themselves just constantly going around the circle. And now that's my headline for the next 2 weeks, basically. Um, so I think that's excuse me. That's all I wanted to show you on AstroSeek. And what that was too, it was the AstroSeek Benefic Malefic Enclosure Calculator. If you just put that into Google, it'll come up for you. And I try to look at it every month. If I'm missing any of these, it's because I didn't use that calculator. Hello, Holly. Hello, Mandy. Welcome. All right. I'll get to comments again in a moment. So let's dive into the details. I think I'll reflect on the last eclipse when we get to the next one. That's pretty much the only thing I wanted to really reflect on about the last 2 weeks was that eclipse. Uh, so we're starting off the month with Mercury at 27 degrees of Aries, stationing retrograde. Like I had mentioned before, they're going to move it back to 15 degrees of Aries, recover that ground, and they will be stationing again on the 25th of April. Mercury retrogrades in general, my protocols are under schedule yourself, under promise yourself, try not to overextend yourself, booking yourself back to back on things, or like not giving yourself much wiggle room in your commute time, or, it's like, okay, I just need to make this quick phone call. It's like, it's not going to be a quick phone call. I'm going to just do this last minute, task at home before I leave for work. Nope, it's probably not going to be a quick last minute task. Those are the little things that I notice always trip me up. In Aries specifically, moving too fast, starting too many things at the same time. So I think those, and I say this every time like a broken record, like every Mercury retrograde, it's good to slow down. just be mindful, doing one thing at a time as best we can, as much as capitalism never allows us to do that. Here in Aries, that's slowing down if we have the privilege to slow down. Which more and more I'm like, God, it's such a privilege to slow down. And it's starting to drive me nuts when people don't take it. Let's try to slow down. I know that's easy for me to say, only having one Aries planet. I'm sure all the Aries people are like, yeah, right. But do your best. And I think we'll get through it. Give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Give other people the benefit of the doubt. If there's a miscommunication, a misunderstanding, it was probably just that. That's what I have to say about Mercury retrograde. This is the third quarter moon at this point. So we had a new moon in Pisces. And at this beginning of April now, we've gone through 75% of that lunation cycle. And we are at the last square of that. So usually a little bit more of a tense point in the lunar cycle where we're trying to wrap up things that we've been up to maybe over the last 3 weeks or so, and starting to think about how we will wrap up anything that we're working on. And two, if it's not that material world, like physically working on something, a lot of times full moons, I feel like there's like a realization and understanding and internal kind of up leveling that happens. And then we spend the next 2 weeks like integrating that into our life and being like, oh yeah, I figured that thing out. Now I'm seeing it everywhere and it's getting integrated into me or whatever. I feel like that's such like a waning moon, disseminating moon process. So we might just be, at this point, first day of April, processing from that last eclipse, processing from that full moon, and whatever went on there, we're integrating it. We're working it into things. I think one of the bigger things I'm watching at this point is the sun is now within 3 degrees of the North Node, or Rahu, which I usually talk about as more of this kind of confusing type of energy that we need to sort out or try to navigate skillfully when it's difficult to do that. It is an increasing type of energy, very much more. And so that, in Aries, more initiations, more action going, getting there from point A to point B, just like that, as fast as we can. I love this type of energy, but very much, if you're feeling frenzied, frenetic, if there's too much going on and it's causing confusion, that could be your sign that Rahu is in the mix. When I think about the sun in Aries getting amplified, it's that power it's just power. It's just vitality. It's vigor. It's walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And that can be insofar as if I say I'm going to do the dishes tonight, you better believe I'm doing the dishes tonight. So, I think that's a beautiful energy. My concern is it's just burnout or overdoing it. So just like, it's like, I'm going to go out and tackle this, shoveling this whole pile of snow. Well, just take it easy, like do it, but pace yourself. You don't have to do it all right now. I think that's going to be the energy in this first week of April is wanting to go for things. We'll talk about Mars being with Saturn, but that is kind of a frustrating slowing down influence. So I think if we just kind of get ahead of that and just pace ourselves in the first place, we can also avoid a little bit of this Mars-Saturn frustration about pacing that might be going on in April. Sun in Aries is that like very like self-expression for the pure, unadulterated reason of self-expression. Like I'm gonna just do what I want to do and be me just because. And I, for one, support that. However, Libra exists and Venus exists. And I do personally find that Mars and Venus are an inextricable duality pair that must go together for things to not get wild. So for things to stay temperate, self-expression without any care for consequence can be fine, can do nothing. It can also be really destructive. So, choose your choice. This is weird. I don't usually bring the local news into it, but locally where I am, there was recently someone who is a local business owner like a business owner who had been secretly doing like their own kind of like graffiti tag on various private properties all around the city. And unfortunately, a lot of video game machines, a lot of arcade pinball machines were harmed in these incidences. And the guy got caught. And all I kept thinking about is like, man, just this self-expression with no boundaries, no lanes, just pure self-expression that ended up being really destructive. And so that's what we don't. That's an example of, I think, what not to do with this energy. If we feel ourselves getting a little bit even rightfully self-righteous about certain things going on in the world, I think we got to think about the long game, because Aries is not thinking about the long game. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I am dating a beautiful Aries person, and without his initiative, I would be a box of soup. I would be a box. Yeah, they do make boxes of soup now. Yeah. Um, I need Aries energy, but this is a lot. This is a lot. So let's look at this. It starts to wane on the 5th. So this first few days of April, like the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, use the energy, channel it. It's great. Don't overdo it. Don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt other people with that just immense, just fiery power that's going on there. Okay, sermonette concluded. Venus is also within a degree pretty much of Neptune. 2 degrees at the beginning of the month. So this is the other energy that's going on. It's like we've got this Mars, Saturn, hard work, discipline, motivation, maybe frustrating kind of thing. We've got this really powerful, vigorous energy to begin. We've got some novel solutions, disruptive solutions going on, the power to enact them, the will to want to enact those solutions and do those things. And all of that's going on, maybe at a pace that's slower than we want to do. But Venus and Neptune, okay, they're helping in terms of creating a vision, creating an ideal form that we want to aspire toward. They are not helping in terms of clear communication with people. So great, again, for artistic purposes, creative purposes. I actually really am fascinated by having that artistic, visionary, creative quality along with this very much like, let's make it real, let's do it in the real world quality of Mars and Saturn. I think we can bring those together and just have this Pisces area be just this like so generative kind of it's very generative area in our chart right now. But at the same time, it's like I can also see this energy, and we're trying to skillfully place our effort. And, maybe Venus and Neptune are not helping keep that process on the rails. So as long as we are, not just spending all of our time daydreaming and actually doing things down here, I think that's how we kind of keep that in balance. But yeah, I'm happy to have this softer influence in the sky. This is also very inclusive, socially, very connective, great for spiritual works, great for social situations. And it can be kind of a helpful lubricant when we've got basically, it's like, it's just so helpful when we've got what is essentially a rock in our shoe. Yeah. So that's going on. Venus and Neptune, they're going to be perfecting on the 2nd of April. They'll still be, within a degree range on the 3rd of April. So lots of energy to do stuff, lots of like aspirational, inspiration, aspiration, inspiration in the environment. That's all very cool. I do think there is some possibility of getting things confused or something gets befuddled. So over communicate. Uh, let's see. Yeah, just be clear about your boundaries. If you're wanting to start something, say yes to something, initiate something, Venus and Neptune, God, and it is in this last 10 degrees of Pisces too. So this last 10 degrees of Pisces, this is the Mars decan, and Austin Coppock talks a lot about this being a place of intense devotion, potentially even to the wrong thing. So really making sure that, and as a person with a moon in there, I have definitely devoted myself to the wrong things several times in my life. I think if we're honest, a lot of us have at certain points in time. That's how you learn what's right for you, by going through things that are wrong for you. uh, let's just make sure that whatever we are feeling this inspirational quality to devote ourselves to, that it is, there's it's fair, it's empowering, it is, has a long game plan if it needs to, if it's something that needs a long game plan, that it has one. Yes. Let's see. I think that pretty much carries us through the first few days of the month. I think that gets us to the fourth, where we're going to have Venus entering into Aries. So we'll talk about that. Quite a big shift in her space points and her dignity points. Before I get into that, let me check on this chat. Reverend Kai says, this year I added the enclosures to my Google Calendar. They've been really noticeable in tracking them. Oh, great. So I love little anecdotes like that of people who are watching the same things I am, because it helps me to it helps validate me. I'm like, oh yeah, you're seeing that too. Okay, I'm not crazy. Cool. So Reverend Kai is saying like, yeah, the AstroSeek benefic malefic enclosure calculator of the moon. It is just, it's a vibe check. It is like such a good vibe check. And as we will see, not all of them are is it going to be as intense or even noticeable, but man, it's worth watching. Um, oh, Mandy Bailey has a really cute analogy here. Uh, they said, I know you have a background in pharmacy. They do too. Hi. Oh my God. So you know. Oh no, you know. They say, I see retrogrades as the medicine being prescribed by the sky. Ah, that's so nice. I love that. It is. I get it. I think that's sometimes why we do not like retrogrades. They give us the medicine, don't they? Yeah. And it's just sometimes the medicine is doing things differently than we have done them before. We're trying new things. But yeah, it is always cute too. RX, which I guess is like Latin for recipe or something. I'm not sure. I should know, shouldn't I? So I guess Mercury also giving us the recipe for things during a retrograde. So let's look out for the recipes. Um, hello, Holly. Yeah, yeah, March and April are weird. Like if we just zoom out on the year, it's like, and this was my speed run of transits through the year that I use in my consults, but um, January, February was like that, what I kept calling like everything was like very direct and visible and quote unquote functional. And it was a really busy time. Everyone I talked to, it's like, yeah, now the gears are moving of my life and I'm busy as shit tending to them beautifully. Yay. Um, okay, that's January, February, March, April, weird. And then when we get to May, June, and July, and then we'll see all those nice Jupiter, Taurus, Gemini weather transits, which is going to be a very different story. So, not to like kick the can down the road and not be with the present moment. I don't want to feed into resistance to being here now. But also, it's nice to know, like, with the medicine, there will be some kind of resolution. And when we look at that Mercury retrograde time too that's happening, it's like if we just hang in there, we know that there's always a resolution at the end of, well, I shouldn't say always, but usually a resolution at the end of Mercury retrogrades. This is why we do astrology. I think it's nice to also see these changes, which is like if I put on my little sloppy Buddhist hat, it's like, yeah, just see the change. That's what we're doing here too, if we can just be with it. Hello, Tracy. Hello, woke ones. Hello, fallen soap. Oh, no need to be worried about being late. We're casual here. Uh, hello, Atlas. Michael asks a really great question. Are these lunar enclosures intensified? Is their effect intensified by Time Lord? Yeah. So basically, I mean, anytime a planet is a Time Lord. So if you're new to the term Time Lord, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna get into it too much now. But for those of you who are privy to that concept, whether it's annual profections that is showing, which areas of the chart are activated, which planets are activated as the Lord of the year. Let's say it's like Mars or something, then that contact in the enclosure, I would expect to be the more intense part than say if Saturn was your Time Lord. So maybe, that tiny part of the enclosure is the most intense for you. Let's say you're in a lunar year, like a Cancer profection year or something. Then I would expect just the entire enclosure itself, all of these enclosures to be more vivid. If you're in a Venus or Jupiter year, then maybe the benefic enclosures are hitting more loudly for you. Let's hope that's the case, right? So just to answer, like, yeah, like it totally matters. And that is going to help us get even with a finer tooth comb, like really get into the nitty gritty of like, okay, if I've got this 12-hour period of time, is it going to be the beginning that's harder for me or the end of it? Like, and those are the weeds that are really fun to get into, but that I can't hear. But good question. Oh, cool, Jamie. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Cause you're like, I guess it's your evening over there. Good evening, Jamie. Thanks for joining. All right. So now we're at let's talk about Venus going into Aries. So, a matter of dignity. This is a conversation that is ongoing on the interwebs if you're in astrology internet land. But the concept of dignity, a planet ruling over a sign, having some other type of rulership, whether it's domicile, exaltation, bound lordship, that determines a planet's resourcing. And resourcing then determines how able is that planet able to do itself? How well is Venus, in this case, able to do Venus tasks, connection, love, beauty, art, ethics, values, justice, fairness? How is she able to do those things given how much resourcing she has? Now, that's one question. The second question for me, especially if I'm looking at this in like a birth chart, which is a whole different matter, but I know that's where people's minds go, so I like to cover it. When I'm thinking about, oh, I lost my thought. Oh yeah, okay. First question, the condition. Second question, how does that affect that person's life? Because just because a planet is in quote unquote good condition by these technical terms, we have to make this kind of technical thing, right? And then we can figure out the nice euphemistic words to put on top of it. But if a planet is in good condition, that doesn't mean it's going to be comfortable for the person. If a planet is in gnarly or difficult or bad condition, that doesn't mean that the person's life is doomed or they'll even always experience that as bad. It is unfortunately not that simple. So this, like looking at someone's birth chart or even the chart of a moment, when you got a planet that's really strong, perchance in domicile, has a lot of resourcing. That's what we mean by strong and good condition, has a lot of resourcing. Sometimes that can just be a big, strong dog on a leash. And now you have to control that dog on a leash. Good luck. Like, it's like, oh, you're managing a Michelin star chef in a kitchen and you're trying to tell them what you think a good menu would be. Yeah, good luck telling that, Venus and Libra exactly what to do. She is going to be driving that ship. So those are two separate things, the condition of the planet and then how that comes out in the life. Very different things potentially, and not always intuitive like the ways that we think they are. So when we're looking at a planet in Aries, yeah, she doesn't have as many space points. She's not going to be as resourced as she might be in Pisces, Libra, Taurus, where she has a lot of dignity. But she's going to do her best. And this means that, okay, connection. Usually like most people want to connect and it takes time to build connection, usually. In Aries, this is really fast. This is way faster than a nighttime planet that usually wants to go at a slower pace would like to go. So connection might be so fast that it's difficult or it feels like nerve-wracking or stressful or something like that. Perhaps there are separations in connection, not because something went wrong, but because there just wasn't enough time, you know? So that can be just that difficulty for Venus in terms of pacing. There's an incongruency. So that's another way of thinking about it too. Resourcing for the planet, but also congruency. She's here to connect. Usually that's easier when we've got wine, charcuterie, good music, soft blankets, good smells, stuff like that. In Aries, this is like trying to make friends at the gym. It's kind of weird. People are like focusing on pumping iron or like, on a battlefield or something, and you're given a sword and a shield to do your connecting with. It's like, yeah, I mean, I guess we could become workout buddies, it's not impossible, but it's not as easy and free flowing of an environment to connect in for Venus. So does that mean that Venus is bad or that she's not able to connect, or that, okay, let's say you meet like a beautiful person while Venus is in Aries. Are you like, does that mean I shouldn't date them? Like, no, not at all. Maybe they're just going to be like your adventure buddy, but yeah, it's a complicated matter. It's a nuanced matter in some ways. But I think all in all, this is less comfortable for Venus. And we just got done with having a lot of, okay, these two aside, Mars and Saturn and Pisces aside, Venus in Pisces is exalted. She's like the guest of honor. She has all of the things that she wants to socialize. And now she doesn't have any of those same tools. So we, in our relationships, maybe in our ability to find pleasure, it might be harder for us temporarily to do that, or we might have to find resourceful ways or be flexible with how we're relating, how we are having fun, how we're doing pleasure, joy, all of those Venusian things. So just it's like, okay, we might have to do things differently. And also just to align with this energy, okay, if Venus is about values, ethics, what we value as people in this culture, it's like money, sex, drugs, rock and roll. That's what we value. In Aries, we are actively going after that. We are doing the fire, the action to do it. We are initiating pleasure, initiating fun, initiating relationship, becoming fast friends. That's totally possible here. That's the good part of that side of that coin. So, that initiatory, action oriented in the name of pleasure, also in the name of ethics, being assertive about what is right, being assertive about what's fair to us. It's all a very subjective thing, but Venus in Aries can do a really good job of standing up for whatever that person values, especially in the house topics that they're in. So if you're a Libra rising and this is happening in your seventh house or something, maybe you're standing up for what you believe in your partnerships, or maybe you're asserting yourself in partnership so that you can have an ethical partnership of some kind. So it can get really kind of abstract like that as well. But Venus is very much a part of that fight for ethics, fight for what is just, fight for all of those things. So the analogy I like to use a lot is Xena Warrior Princess. If anyone remembers Xena Warrior Princess from the 90s, that's this for sure. So especially in this first 10 degrees, if we want to look at those decans, this is the Mars ruled decan, and it is just extremely martial. So it's not the middle decan that's more firm, stable, solar energy. Yeah, Venus is not taking any shit at all. Very warrior queen mode, very much. She's also, as we can see, she's about 15 degrees away from the sun. And that means that she's near her phasis. So let's see what I wrote about that. Yeah, so this is the week where Venus begins her descent into the beams of the sun, because being she's going faster than the sun, she will eventually pass through on the other side. Now, that won't be till like May when Venus actually meets the sun and does her own conjunction with the sun. But this is going to be the point now, first week of April, where depending on your location, she is going to start to become invisible in the sky, in the morning sky. And so, as much as, okay, Xena Warrior Princess, some of that work that she's doing, some of that asserting, some of that making, getting started on certain things or initiating things, it might be a little dialed down. So let's dial it down a little bit because we know that she's losing her visibility. And let's, maybe make it more internal. Maybe it's some internal work as well, externally focused, but also like if you have ethics to uphold in your own life, looking inward and pulling out that strength or whatever you need to do that for yourself as much as in relationship with other people. I guess off the top of my head, I'm not coming up with any real life examples of that, but I know there's plenty. I mean, I can just think of in pharmacy all the times where it's like I'm faced with like a potentially morally injurious situation where it's like, yeah, I know the right, or I know the thing that this company wants me to do, and I know the thing that the insurance company says that I have to do legally, and I know this other stuff that I might have to, maybe bend some laws about. How can I do that? And how can I do what I know that is right to do without getting myself in legal trouble? So it's like doing what is ethical, but it's quieter. It's like we're not announcing it out loud like I'm doing right now and shouldn't be. So yeah, it could be like that. But if you are called, even uncomfortably, to be more assertive, to, not abandon yourself, if that be around people, relationships, even vices, Venus in Aries is a powerful time to do that. So I think I'll leave it at that with Venus there. Is there anything else I had? Oh, yeah. So one other thing too, and I think this is a really powerful time because the first thing that Venus does as well when she gets into this space is she has a sextile with Pluto. And anytime a planet is in a sextile or a trine with Pluto, I feel like it's an opportunity to work with these really ingrained habit patterns, or even like power dynamics external to us. If we need to do any navigating around that, the sextile can be more of an easeful entry point into some of that work with, issues of empowerment, power dynamic stuff, or just habit patterns of our own behavior, of our own mind. It's a good time to look at those things. So especially if there's like relational patterns, even just internally, how we're thinking about relationships, good time to work on those patterns. And I mean, that's pretty much like just like the fourth and the fifth, but Venus is still pretty nearby for a little while. And the last thing I wanted to say about it was just that if we bring up the more complicated wheel, we can see that, okay, decan of Aries, first decan of Aries is Mars, but the first bound lords are benefic. And so it's kind of like Demetra George uses the analogy of like the style of homeroom teacher you have in school. So did you have a nice homeroom teacher or more of a strict disciplinarian homeroom teacher? At least in this very transformative, maybe uncomfortable patch for Venus, she's got Jupiter and Venus as bound lords in this first area, which helps to make things a little bit more forgiving, a little bit more tolerable if there are some uncomfortable situations we're in. Sun is conjunct with Rahu at this point on the 4th. You get Venus coming in, Sun conjunct Rahu. So yeah, that initiatory quality is really there. So how do we harness that momentum of initiation, of getting going, of beginning on things without getting going on the wrong things? The moon is going to be sextile Mercury as well. Yeah, the 4th is just a very interesting day. The moon will be sextile Mercury. Venus is going into Aries. We'll be sextiling Pluto. So yeah, even more just to say working with ingrained patterns, working with all of this internal stuff. I feel like after, hopefully by the time we're in our 30s, we're all like trying to decondition all the stuff inside of us and rebuild it to be a little bit kinder. This is all great on like the first week of April to work on that stuff. Uh, Listen to TED Talks. That's what I always like to do. Introduce yourself to new information or experiences. And then we get one of the first Chiron things on the 5th. We get the sun with Chiron. So, not exactly. Oh, it's just the engagement. So, on the 5th is when we get the sun in an engagement with Chiron. So, within 3 degrees applying, that is going to perfect, I believe. When is it? Did I write it down? No, I didn't. Yeah, it looks like that perfects on the 9th, no, the 7th. So like April 5th, April 6th, April 7th, we're going to have Sun Chiron vibes. And that is definitely a a vibe of healing, of dealing with difficult things though, that, are not necessarily easy to heal. Um, this can also be teachers and mentors that help us through difficult things. So, around the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th of April, remembering teachers, remembering to rely on the help of teachers, the help of mentors if we need to. The older you are, perhaps you are more stepping into those teacher or mentor roles, and you're really noticing that you're stepping into those roles during this time, this first week of April. But if there are wounds in that Aries part of your chart, this is a good time. Like the sun shines light on things, and the UV rays of the sun can actually like kill bacteria and things that we don't want that are harmful. So in this kind of, it's almost like a bit of a sterilization of the wound. And it's not comfortable. It's usually not a comfortable type of experience. I'm now thinking of all of like, I'm thinking of medical things that are gross. So it's not comfortable all the time, but that doesn't mean that it's not constructive. Um, or not a good thing. I'll just use myself as an example. Um, with that publication that I have that I'm really thankful about and really excited about, I also now must be perceived, and people are going to read my work, and I know, maybe some people won't like it or will find a mistake. What if I made a mistake and someone will see it, So, and I got, for me, this is really healing because in my residency, I tried to do a piece of research that didn't get published because the people who were supposed to be supporting me didn't like what I found. And that really sucked. And that was a defeat that I, I feel like I did not get over. And now I feel like publishing this paper has kind of like helped me smooth over that wound of like getting rejected from my last attempts at publication like so long ago. It was like 15 years ago, 12 years ago. So, yeah, it can be something like that where it's actually, I feel like especially the older and older and older you get, there can be more and more opportunities for healing or reconciliation. So all of this applies to with the eclipse. All of the things I just said, it's like the sun is both luminaries here, maybe exposing something about these wounds or like showing us something about these wounds that we might have in the Aries part of our chart that we really didn't know about before or that we didn't expect. So I think this is a really impactful, cool time. I don't think it's comfortable. I don't think it's a bad thing. Those are my opinions about it. Um, what else about Sun Chiron? And just too, like, again, like the sun in Aries feels like walking the walk, not just talking the talk, really embodying and being that kind of firm, stable presentation of the things that we want in the world and kind of taking action to actually make that real, walking the walk. That's what I really feel like this is about. So before we talk about the eclipse, I just wanted to get on that Sun Chiron business that does definitely play into the eclipse. But we do have our first moon malefic enclosure, and that is on the 6th. And what's going to happen is the moon's going to be between Mars and Saturn by body. Now, if I could do a different, grades of malefic enclosure, anytime any planet is getting an opposition from Saturn, an overcoming, where the Mars is earlier in the zodiacal order, an overcoming square from Mars or an opposition with Saturn, those are rough. Those are the most rough. So like a bodily enclosure by bodily conjunction, also higher on the list of roughness of enclosure. When we are in like a sextile or a trine with the malefics, I dial those down in intensity because those aspects are going to be less harmful. There was debate amongst earlier astrologers whether that meant that Mars Saturn could not harm a planet in a sextile or a trine, or if the harm was just mitigated. I'm on team gray, probably somewhere in between. Depends. But yeah, this one is not one to shake your stick at. And the exact timing of this one, it's on the 6th from 12:07 a.m. Central Time to 5:09 a.m. Central Time. So it's about 5 hours long and in the wee hours in Central Time. But if you're getting more to Universal Standard Time, that's like right in your morning, early part of your day. If you were more globally east, that's your afternoon into your evening, that first malefic bodily enclosure. So just know on the 6th, on Saturday, April 6th, maybe a mind your own business day. Maybe a working through that intense problem solving day. Maybe a day to watch the feelings, but not get swayed by them too much. We might be feeling pretty frustrated, pretty emo on the 6th. If I'm feeling a certain way and being, thinking all kinds of outcomes, I'm going to know that my mind may or may not be trustworthy on that day. So there's that. Now, not right after it, but pretty close after it. So it's like we've got 5 hours of this malefic enclosure and then about 6 hours, 7 hours off. And then we have a benefic enclosure. So the benefic enclosure starts on the 6th at 12:12 p.m. Central Time. And it actually extends a whole day pretty much into the next, well, I shouldn't say. Yeah. Yeah, actually, pretty much almost a whole day into the next day on the 7th at 11:21 a.m. Central Time. So benefic enclosure between 12:12 p.m. Central Time on the 6th to 11:21 a.m. Central Time on the 7th. And that is going to be applying to a sextile with Jupiter and then a conjunction with Venus. So we have, I'll show you here. So then after we get away from Saturn, the moon then will be able to interact with Jupiter. And it'll have its sextile with Jupiter. That'll be its last applying aspect. And then its next one after that, if we're not counting the outers, so I'm not looking at Uranus here, the next aspect the moon will make is a bodily application with Venus. So that is the benefic enclosure that lasts from the 6th into the 7th. So this is kind of our first, lower and higher kind of pretty quick in change. Then we have the waning moon here having met with Venus and will also meet with Pluto. So what I was just mentioning, that Venus-Pluto opportunity to work with ingrained habit patterns or dynamics in relationships that we want to change or be different around, that was on the 4th. Now we're seeing this kind of repeated on the 7th, a bit with the moon touching base with these two planets again. And then we have our eclipse. This is actually the last aspect the moon has before it does its eclipse. So, or it has the eclipse with the sun. So, very interesting, especially if there are themes around this eclipse that are involved with relationship, vice, fairness, ethics, any of those Venus topics, pleasure, beauty, art. Self-expression of art, self-expression of values. Yeah, all of that. Just with that Aries self-expressive fire piece acting on those things. Okay, let's talk about the eclipse. So before we do that, let's talk about the last one. The last one we had was in Libra, and well, it was not witnessed. Neither of these eclipses get witnessed by their ruler. So it's like if, usually my advice around eclipses is that we just watch them, that we do not initiate things around them if we can help it. But that if we do, again, this is just like, okay, some people need to be the change makers. Some people in the world need to be kind of living on the edge of things, living in the danger zone, doing those kind of things that eclipses talk about. Um, so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but then the eclipses get baked into whatever is initiated during this time. So looking at, is this a good time too, with the rulers not even being able to resource these planets? That's the thing too, is if the ruler of that place cannot see into it by an aspect, then that's another resourcing challenge for whatever planet is in there. And so this last one, we didn't have any kind of rulership seeing it. We don't in the next one. What that tells me is that there's not like an outcome to be looking for. There's not like some resolution or some realization or some magic thing that is resolved or exposed or something during this eclipse that has everything, all the loose ends tied up. There's just like a disjointedness to it. So just kind of letting whatever comes up, whatever realizations we have, whatever is exposed, that we just sit with it, I think, for a bit. And then once we do start to get Mars into Aries, they can help with that. And even now, okay, this second eclipse, April 8th, Mars cannot see into it. But at least Venus is here. So I think Venus here helping a little bit, just being able to see in here. Her co-presence softens things. It helps us to be kinder to ourselves and others. But I think she can also give us a few pointers from her home of Libra in terms of how to navigate these things, in terms of being diplomatic or patient. Granted, I mean, fake harmony is the thing. So, I hate fake harmony. Harmony that is spurred on by like guilt, shaming, all of those things where people are behaving out of those, not behaving out of love or behaving out of, acting out of a impulse to help or to care for. That can be a bit of a chestnut to work with in terms of, yeah, I won't get into that. I digress. So this is at 19 degrees, 19 degrees, 24 arc minutes. Not quite the exaltation degree, which is the 19th degree, which goes from 18 to 1859. So not quite the exaltation degree of the sun, but I mean, depending on how, I feel like the exaltation degrees, their origins are kind of fraught anyway. Like I don't know. I'm a little bit more fast and loose with how I treat exaltations. But if you're someone who like wanted it on the degree, close but not quite. This is the solar decan. So I did want to talk about this. So Austin Coppock is my main inspiration here for my thoughts around this. But what I have from his notes, well, so I listened to the Nora Wack lecture so it was a workshop that he did because I don't have the book, which allegedly is coming out again soon, very soon, the second edition of 36 Faces. But what he said just verbally, so I don't know, whether this is in the book, but he had mentioned that you have to cut a path through the world to make a spot of your own little sovereignty. Um, there can be leading by example. Let's see. So you did not inherit this place, you made it yourself, so it's yours. Uh, it's a place created and maintained by action, and just a lot of stuff about leading and leading by example. So this is kind of part of what's inspiring me to think of like walking the walk, not just talking the talk with this. It's that solar quality and this visible quality of that middle part of Aries. Um, it's talking about the confidence necessary to cut a path for yourself. Your purpose may be acted out through or alongside of a relationship, potentially with Venus here. I think those are my thoughts, not his. Uh, yeah, yeah. So that's what I have there. And then T. Susan Chang is my other inspiration for looking at this middle decan of Aries. And this, we're thinking more on terms of like the Three of Wands for those of you who do the tarot correspondences with the decans. But some of the things that they mentioned, um, mm, I'm just going to read this. So this is page 6 of 36 Secrets by T. Susan Chang. It says, new growth clothed in green, Aries to the Three of Wands. So we've got, according to the Latin Picatrix, this image causes nobleness, height of a kingdom, and greatness of dominion. Uh, blah, 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 da, 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 da. What was important that I wanted to get out of here? Yeah, so I'm gonna just read the takeaway. So the takeaway that she lists, when you draw this card, the Three of Wands, so looking at this decan, cultivate hopeful expectation, have faith in the good efforts you have already made, invest in well thought through acts of benevolence, as your generosity will be reciprocated in the long term. Make your own rules and live by them. She discusses a lot about how the solar part of this decan makes it for like this firmness. It's like in the first part of the decan, you're you're kind of cutting through and making a place your own. But then in the middle decan, you want to hold on to it. You want to keep it. You want to make it more stabilized, being that you've cut through this path, you want to actually have some stable place to be and then express from there. But she also talks about, reciprocity in that and not it just being a totally selfish endeavor. And that there is something in this solar quality and in that ability to make it firm that you almost have to um not just be this wild divisive energy. Like you have to include the other a little bit and have some kind of reciprocity involved in it. And I think this pairs well with Libra being the other eclipse that we had. Libra being the place of considering the other, thinking about the longer term consequences of things. So even too, I know they're not connected by aspect, but Mars, who rules this eclipse, is with Saturn. So there's that notion again of firmness, continuity, commitment, long-term endeavors, longer-term stories. Venus is here making it relational. So I have a feeling that as much as, again, pacing, we want to go fast, we want to get started, we want to have this great new beginning. There are things that make it like we need to be following some of the rules on the way there. There are certain steps that need to be taken that we cannot ignore, um, even if we're feeling very vigorous about it. So the fact that Chiron is involved with all this, just going back to that, are we learning from past mistakes? Are we, tending to wounds in a way that is constructive and helpful, not just like being sad about it? Are we asking our teachers, our mentors for help? Are we remembering what we've learned from teachers and mentors in the past? I think that's how Chiron kind of comes into this. Uh, mm, I'm not even going to bring in Ceres. If you're an asteroid person, Ceres is overcoming this. I'm going to actually bring her in here for the asteroid people. Oh, yeah. I just thought it was interesting how she is overcoming this by a very direct square within 2 degrees. So there's something here too. I mean, I'm not really big on like being able to teach I use Ceres in my own life, but I don't know her well enough to teach her. But if you use Ceres, this is part of this story. I just wanted to point that out for the people who care. So big beginnings and endings. That is what a solar eclipse is about. New chapters. So at the very basic, new chapters in the Aries part of your chart. Beginnings and endings, new ways of doing things. Even if there is nothing externally happening around you, maybe you're coming to April 8th and it's absolute crickets in your life. Your life is so boring. Maybe on the inside of you, there is some new chapter happening. Maybe you've recommitted doing something differently in your own life, and maybe no one around you knows. Whatever is going on April 8th, the energy in the sky is pretty ripe for really being aware of new chapters opening up. So just watch the skies, see what's wanting to open, see what's wanting to burgeon forth. Maybe sometimes I wonder too if it's like the sky is speaking about new beginnings. The sky is showing us, hey, there's a new beginning here. I don't always think we like see it and understand it as a new beginning when it's happening. Sometimes I think we can even be resisting it. We're still in the process of resisting a new beginning. And we're not in this space of appreciating it as a new chapter. So if you're feeling resistance about something, about a new beginning too, it might be ones that we haven't agreed to yet. That could be another way of considering this. So that's what I have to say about that. On the 9th, we get the moon in Taurus. So this is another bump down and up on our roller coaster. So now we get our next set of malefic enclosure things. Oh, and I should say too, so the moon's last aspect before the eclipse was Venus. The moon's next aspect after the eclipse is Mercury. So right after this eclipse, moon is going to talk to Mercury, and then it'll have a square with Pluto. So that's like some pretty serious conversations potentially, if I want to back this up. Yeah, so the moon has to move through Mercury. And then at the very beginning of Taurus, when the moon enters Taurus, it'll be in a square with Pluto. So on the 8th, there might be some heavier pressurized conversations or heavier or pressurized thoughts or plans happening internally. Just a good thing to watch. And then after that, we get the moon in a sextile with malefics. So this is where, yes, the moon is going to be in contact with them, but it is by a sextile. So I don't expect it to be anything too difficult or challenging. On the 10th, we do have the Mars-Saturn conjunction coming together. So they'll be at 14 degrees of Pisces. I mean, in general, the month of March, if you've got any Pisces planets, probably going to be kind of an intense or just a hard work of a month. I think about Mars as our motivation, our effort. Saturn is discipline, structure, continuity. So both of those, just effort over time, lots of effort, difficult effort, any of that going on. When they come together, this is a thing that only happens every 2 years, I believe. And it's a new 2-year cycle of effort opening up. That's what I'm considering this. And I just love that Jupiter can see everything that's going on. So Jupiter ruling over Pisces, it's like whatever this new 2-year cycle of effort is opening up in the Pisces part of your chart with those house topics. I just love that they are getting great guidance and they're also finding support in Taurus. So then if Pisces is hard for you, so let's say this is for a Leo rising, this is their 8th house of shared resources. Maybe there's difficulties going on with your partner's resources or just sharing resources with them, having enough for the family. But maybe the career is looking good or bright. Maybe the job life, the career life, Jupiter is up there helping you maybe giving you a raise or something like that. So there's help. And at the very least, Jupiter brings liberation from difficulty at the least. So I think sometimes we look around and we're like, okay, I'm looking to the Taurus part of my chart for help, for help, and there's nothing. Sometimes it is just liberation from a difficult thing and the stabilization that comes with liberation from a difficult thing. At best, Jupiter is the opportunity, the growth, the expansion. Whatever it is, even if it's just appreciating, okay, there's that difficulty in Pisces, but at least it's not going to totally sink my ship. That I think might be what we're left with, but it's better than nothing. So the moon on the 10th, the moon is with the optimistic part of this equation, not the frustrated part of it. And this helps a lot. This is such a nice mitigation to have during this conjunction. So even though we have difficulty, I think our spirits will be okay. Maybe we had just had, maybe a gnarly eclipse, but we see the light. We see the potential for opportunity. We see the help down the road even a little bit. And maybe it'll be unexpected with Uranus there. There's a short malefic enclosure here, and that is going to be between the sextile rays of Mars and Saturn, being they are so close, of course. It's going to be a really short one. So let's work smarter, not harder. So from is here. Now I have it pulled up here correctly. But it's in the morning in the central time zone, 5:48 a.m. It's really short, 5:48 a.m. Central Time to 6:16 a.m. So it's like a half hour in the morning of the 10th. Now, if this is in universal time, this is more your late morning into early afternoon. The further globally east you are, this is going to be in your afternoon. And so it's like, okay, 5:48 a.m. Central Time, 6:16 a.m. Central Time, whatever that little chunk is, that's where I don't have the meeting. What day is that? Is that a weekday? That's a Wednesday. So don't have the meeting then. Shut your office door during those times. Avoid the rays during those times. The Mars-Saturn conjunction perfects at about 3 p.m. on the 10th of April. And then Mars will get on the other side of Saturn. And now, if things have been kind of frustrated, we're on the path away from Saturn, away from that delay, away from the slowness, away from the obstacle. The action that we want to take is going to be more and more able to be taken the further now into April we get. On the 10th, so I mentioned in the morning, there's the malefic enclosure of the moon. The Mars-Saturn conjunction perfects at 3 p.m. By the 13th of April, so 3 days later, Mars will be 3 degrees away from Saturn. And so they'll be out of that really close range and really feeling better by mid-April, I think, after that frustrating conjunction. And then there's a benefic enclosure of the moon on that same day. So malefic to later benefic, and that's at 2:19 p.m. until the next day on April 11th at 10:46 p.m. Central Time. So what this is going to look like, what will this look like? Yeah, it's a conjunction with Jupiter and then a sextile with Venus. So the moon is going to clear sextile with the malefics. After it's done with that, then it's going to have a conjunction with Jupiter. And then its next aspect after that, when it gets into Gemini, the moon is going to meet a sextile with Venus. It's kind of like a palindrome of the last benefic enclosure we had, where the moon was coming into or was a sextile with Jupiter to a conjunction with Venus. Now we're having a conjunction with Jupiter and a sextile with Venus. So, I mean, these are sextiles are weaker than a trine. It's like half as good as a trine. Someone once said, who I forgot. So it's, sometimes it's like if you're in the midst of a shitstorm, a little benefic enclosure can give you a rest. It's not necessarily like making everything rainbows and fixing everything that happened, but it's a little quiet respite moment amidst a shitstorm, if you will. So again, that is April 10th to 19 p.m. Central Time until April 11th at 10:46 p.m. Central Time. Uh, and on the 11th as well. So while we are in this benefic enclosure territory with the moon, we're also going to get our Mercury Cazimi. So this 10th and 11th period, there is a bit of a respite for both the moon and Mercury. Both were struggling, and then they get a little bit of a break. Mercury being under the beams of the sun within 15 degrees is rough. Within 8 degrees is even rougher. That's being combust. When Mercury gets in the heart of the sun, Hellenistically within 1 degree on either side of the sun, that planet, in this case Mercury, gets a little bit of a break from those harmful hot rays of the sun. And not only that, but Mercury's having a one-on-one conversation with the sun, with our will, with our spirit. It's like our voice coming together with our spirit. And our spirit is like, hey, the voice, what would you like to say? And then the voice is like, this is what I would like to say. And it's very aligned with the will, like who we are. So it can be a very kind of the word purification is used a lot. It's a rebirth for Mercury. It can be really refreshing and recentering, coming back to the self, remembering of the self. I heard Jason Hawley talk about that when I went to, he did a lot of mythology lectures, myths of the zodiac signs. I love Jason Hawley's work with myth of the zodiac signs, but he talks about the dismembering and the remembering of the self. And when a planet is in the heart of the sun, it always makes me think of that remembering and bringing back together of what is us. And so in the case of Mercury, the thoughts, the ideas, the views that are ours, that we are holding, and our communication, our means of speaking, listening, whatever's aligned with us, really coming back to that, expressing that in a pure form without any kind of other filters, without other things conditioning it, just very pure in that way. In Aries, that just raw, self-expressive way, yeah, this could be quite the moment of clarity. That's a good word. That's maybe what I was looking for. Refreshing clarity on our thoughts, clarity in our words, clarity in even just kind of that meta question of how we want to use our voice and how we want to exchange with others. If you're a buy-in, selling, wheeling, dealing kind of person, maybe this is clarity on how you buy and sell things and the wheeling and dealing that you're doing. But definitely a moment of clarity, definitely a moment of respite. And then knowing that the moon has that little benefic enclosure too, that's a little helpful on the 10th and the 11th. So if we want to then, I'm going to do all the nerd Virgo stuff here for the Cazimi. The Mercury Cazimi at 22 degrees Aries. It's 3 degrees from Chiron at this point, and that gets within 1 degree on April 11th. So the Hellenistic Great Cazimi starts at 4:03 a.m. Central Time. It is within the same degree starting at 4:51 a.m. Central Time at 22 degrees of Aries. And when two planets are in the same degree versus being within 1 degree, that's different than being on the same degree. And it's kind of like being at the same step, like you're on the same step as somebody if I'm in the same degree. And so that's even more close. Within 17 arc minutes, this is the medieval grade astrology version of a Cazimi. It starts at 1:57 p.m. Central Time. The Cazimi itself perfects at 6:02 p.m. Central Time on April 11th. The medieval version is completed at 10 p.m. Central Time. The Hellenistic version completes at 8:30 or 8:03 in the morning the next morning. And those are all the specific times if you need to know that for some reason. So April 11th, about 6 p.m. Central Time is when it's perfecting. If you're having insights, realizations, aha moments, that can happen during, especially a Mercury Cazimi. So if you're having, good ideas, trust them. Listen to yourself. Your thoughts are important. So listen to them. This is also a moment of rebirth because it is the retrograde conjunction of Mercury with the sun. This is part of its rebirth and the restart of its cycle. And it's kind of a reset button, not only for the Aries part of our chart with Mercury being in here, but I would say even more so for the Gemini and Virgo parts of our charts. So for this hypothetical Aries rising person, this would be a rebirth, maybe not only having to do with their voice and their will and how they actually present that in their first house of self, how they express that and embody that, but is also dealing with maybe the sixth house of health and how they take care of their health, disease, recovery from disease. Maybe it's a reset button in terms of third house, short distance travel, regular people you see, communication also in the third house. Reset buttons, reboots for the life topics that are associated with Gemini and Virgo for you, as much as the Aries stuff. So thinking about that and kind of like practically, what do I do with that information? For me, I reflect on those life topics and I look around and I see if anything needs freshening up or needs to be revised, needs to be tightened up, cleaned up, improved, changed, whatever. Uh, There's a benefic enclosure of the moon on the, what did I say? Oh yeah, so that finishes up then. So we have the Cazimi, benefic enclosure of the moon finishes up the evening of the 11th in Central Time. And then we have the 12th, which I have labeled as a mind your own business day. So at this point, we get done with our benefic enclosure and the moon is just in a straight up overcoming square with Mars and Saturn. And they're going to be in between those rays. And that will be pretty short, thankfully. It's from 9:38 a.m. Central Time to 11:50 a.m. Central Time. If you are more universal standard time zones, that is going to be in your afternoon, evening. The further globally east you are, that's evening into your sleepy time. So if you're in America, for instance, where I am, I would not have a meeting on Friday, April 12th between 9:38 a.m. and 11:50 a.m. Well, this is where you shut the office door, so to speak. Um, it's short, but it's an overcoming square. At the end, looks like at the end of Friday Central Time, the moon meets Mercury and Chiron by a sextile. So I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's just relitigation of past events or, you know, coming back to things that we've realized with the Cazimi. But that, that's a sextile, so that's not too bad. But yeah, it's like this overcoming square from the malefics that are more destabilizing. And then like a sextile, maybe serious conversation with Mercury about, what's all being rethought in Aries. So the 12th of April, again, it's just kind of what I would call a crunchy day. And it's just okay. Mercury is joining Chiron for this second time. So actually, let me get specific about that here. So the first one was actually on the 20th, looks like, of March. Mercury and Chiron had a conjunction at 18 degrees of Aries, really close to where the eclipse happened. And again, that was March 20th. So if you want to go back to your whatever your journal prompts were that day or your calendar, remind yourself what was going on. The second of three is April 15th, right after that second eclipse or a week after that second eclipse. And then the third one is May 6th. So March 20th, April 15th, May 6th. By April 12th, we are really on our way to that second one. So 12th of April, we've got Mercury and Chiron within 3 degrees. Mercury's retrograde, so they're moving toward Chiron, applying to them. They just had their Cazimi. Now they're back under the beams of the sun, no longer protected. They no longer have their little parasol and are protecting them from the rays. And so like the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, it's that conversation, the thought centers, the cognating, the thinking, and dealing with Chiron topics of wounds, healing from wounds, things we become experts about and are helping others deal with their wounds, all of that teacher mentor stuff. On the 13th, so 12th, mind your own business. On the 13th, part of that day, the moon is going to be in a square with Neptune. So and Mars is getting to be with Neptune, and I haven't talked about that yet, but Mars and Neptune, it can be action, inspired action, effort, inspired effort, effort toward a dream, effort toward something we've imagined and we are really into. It can also be confused effort, misplaced effort, um, misplaced devotion in this getting into this third, Neptune being in the third part of Pisces, third decan of Pisces. So it can be misplaced effort and confused effort. And with the moon in a square with that, just make sure on the 13th, whatever your actions you are taking, just making sure that everyone's on the same page, that all the facts are understood before we jump in and do things. I'm going to check on the chat here, see if I'm scaring anybody. Because this 2 weeks is just like, it's just okay. Hello. Hello, Nikki. Nice. Welcome back. Yeah. So thank you, Nikki Nice. They said that they're a Cancer rising and that they can attest to the benefic enclosure effect, that even their mistakes were leading to positive outcomes. Yes, totally. That's what the best we can hope for is like, you know, we like it's water off a duck's back, any problems that might happen, or there's some easefulness. There's just some easefulness. Um, the reason why I'm like, sometimes benefic enclosures are just keeping things on the rails. And it's not that great. It's because sometimes it's like the one example I had of the Scorpio moon being in a benefic enclosure. It was actually like about 6 months ago. And it was not my kerfuffle, but I had to follow a friend into their kerfuffle. And that kerfuffle could have been worse had we not been in a benefic enclosure of the moon. And I think it was because of that we didn't have anything bad happen. But it wasn't that anything good happened either. Oh no, Nikki. Good luck with that. I'll be thinking about you. Hello, Christina. What about new beginnings in career on this month, April? Although with natal retrograde Mercury in Aries. Well, I can't speak to the natal bits, but yeah, so just kind of reflecting back to that, okay, eclipses, especially solar eclipses with the new moon, it's like a new moon that's on steroids. It is a more amplified, higher impact, louder, more vivid new moon. And solar eclipses do have this big new chapter kind of energy. And, any kind of beginning, there's always an ending. They come in pairs, as a duality pair, right? Usually. So, not going to say there's not going to be new beginnings and new chapters that are opening up during this time. Let's say you're starting a job and you're like doing the new employee paperwork, and all of the dates on that paperwork are like April 8th, April 8th, April 8th. Does that mean that you're not going to have that job in 6 months? No, it does not mean that. You could be at that job for 40 years. That might be the best career decision you ever made. But maybe every 6 months, it's a new plot point in that story. Something else is happening. So you can then, and that would be very similar to any other, well, I shouldn't say similar to any other, but in that similar way, anything that's started during a certain transit gets plugged into that transit cycle. So, like, let's say you started something during the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. That's a slow, long cycle. So now whatever you started in there is probably going to be really slow. And you'll see, like, maybe at the opening of the sextile or the square, years later, you see things happening. Versus eclipses, it's every 6 months we have an eclipse. So, then you're seeing that. That gets kind of baked into whatever is initiated. It doesn't have to be bad, does not have to be a bad thing. But eclipses are also not stable energy. So maybe, the job that you get into that you sign all the paperwork and a sea eclipse, it's like maybe it's an intense job that's dealing with really changeable circumstances or hidden circuitous weird circumstances, and that's just part of the work. It could be very just descriptive in that way as well. So yeah, Christina, as far as like starting a career in the month of April, really focusing on that eclipse time, that's the case there. As far as the Mercury retrograde beginnings, very similar to all of the just input Mercury themes. It's like, okay, you're signing your paperwork and the person loses it, and then you have to do it again later. And it's not a problem at all. Uh, so it doesn't have to be an issue, but it just, keep your cool if, for instance, you're getting this new job, but the employee onboarding process is a kind of a mess or something. Like I can imagine, and I usually don't do this, but if I was starting a new job during a Mercury retrograde and I like got on board and they were kept messing up all my paperwork, or like, like the training was wonky and all over the place, or like my trainer didn't show up one day, I might start to be like, whoa, where did I just get hired with? Who are these people? They are not running a tight ship at all. But then you're an astrologer, so oh, it's Mercury retrograde. I'm going to give these people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's just a weird onboarding time because it's Mercury retrograde. It does not mean that it has to be the wrong job or anything like that. So this is where it's like, how do we talk about these transits as like, yeah, the wind isn't at your back, but that also means that you don't just not do stuff with your life. Everyone goes to parades in the rain. Like you got to, we put all this work in and now it's scheduled for this day. We have to do it. Yeah. And it's kind of like, this is where I almost wonder, like, the astrology can show us, oh, what should I be doing with my life? Or am I doing the right things with my life? And it's less about that for me. The more I get older, it's more about, it's not what you're doing. It's just like, how are you coping with it? How are you coping with and being a person through all of this stuff? So it's not about, should I do it or not during a Mercury retrograde? It's, I'm going to do this thing. I know there's a Mercury retrograde. Can I be kind and patient while I'm doing all of this? And then astrology is allegedly supposed to help us to be, if we're Hellenistic, stoic, and stoic, not meaning that we don't have feelings, but that we don't let it ruin our day or have us quitting a job that's fine. So yeah, good question. Thank you for the prompt. It's, we could talk about the nuance of these things, I feel like forever. And it's good that we do. Should Fallen Soap says, should we make a wish during the Mercury Cazimi? I mean, sure. Hell yeah. I love making wishes on like an eyelash. Like if I find an eyelash, I'm totally making a wish on that motherfucker for sure. So yeah, we make wishes about everything over here. Um, okay. Let me see. We've only got a few more things left. And I actually have to go soon anyway, because I have to get ready for a client. What day is it? We're on the 13th. We have had now our Mars-Saturn conjunction. The moon witnessed it very clearly. And that new cycle of effort, that new long cycle of effort opening up in Pisces, whatever that is. So for me, it's my money. So guess what I'm going to be, focused on, kind of where am I placing my effort and what am I building over the next 2 years here in terms of my money? So in that example, so if I'm using myself as an Aquarius rising, so for all the other Aquarius risings, no, I mean, this could be okay, a new 2 year cycle of effort with money. I mean, I already have a job. I'm already working as hard as I can possibly work, given my mental health. So, it's not like this happens and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to start this whole new big project that's going to take me 2 years that should allegedly make me money. Um, it might not be that. It might not be directly about money. But if I think about the second house as skills and talents as well, if I think about it as any resource that is mine, my foundation of resources, and I look around at things, there's a lot more that I can put effort into. It could be how I manage my money, like the bookkeeping process that I do. Maybe I'm going to overhaul that. Overhaul feels like a word for Mars, Saturn. Um, for me, it's going to probably be about a new 2 year cycle of effort of how I make income, the means by which I make income. So not the money itself directly, but like right now, all of my money comes from consultations, for instance. It'd be great if I could find time somehow to make a lecture and then like sell educational things that I've created, content creation, as they call it on the streets. So that for me, my big 2 year cycle of effort opening is around how I make income, how I generate income. If you are, say, an Aries rising, and this is your 12th house of mental, emotional, spiritual health, perhaps this is a new 2 year cycle of effort opening up in mental health practices or emotional health practices or any way that you take care of your inner world. The 12th house is also a place of chronic health challenges. So if you're someone who has a chronic illness, is struggling with any kind of chronic challenge with health, whether that be, I mean, it could be very physical things. This could be a new 2 year cycle of effort opening up here in how that is navigated, which can be, this is especially a scenario where very daunting. So I don't want to dismiss or kind of, yeah, I don't want to dismiss or lessen how challenging this could be. I don't want to be like, super Pollyanna and be like, oh, it's just a new 2 year cycle of effort opening up. Just find a new goal and do it for 2 years. It's not that simple. I think that's one of the better outcomes. This could just be, wow, here's the next winding mountainous path in this process that I know I have to navigate. And you're looking down that path. So 12th house could be having to do with those things. I have seen examples like that, which is why I'm using it. So hopefully that gives people some idea. I'm not going to go through all of the rising signs, but just, Google house topics and then think about new cycles of effort opening up there for better or for worse. And then remembering to, it is so important to remember that these planets, Mars and Saturn, are resourced. Mars actually does pretty well in Pisces. Saturn, I mean, it's not the worst place for it. So, Saturn and Mars, they're doing okay in Pisces. And the Lord of that place can see them and help them and guide them. So, looking again to the Taurus part of your chart, is there some stabilization there that at least helps you cope with the Pisces stuff? Or even better, is there help, support, guidance, advancement, progress in the Taurus parts that can actually help support the challenges going on in Pisces? And even when Jupiter goes into Gemini, which I'm going to release a video, I'm working on it, I got to edit it. But Jupiter in Gemini, it's a square, but it'll still be able to see Saturn. So Saturn for the next several years, pretty much until they get into Leo, Saturn's going to have assistance from Jupiter. So I'm really not totally hopeless about the Pisces stuff going on for people. And then final thing I want to discuss is Venus being with Rahu and that perfecting on the 17th, but really starting to get going within 3 degrees by the 15th. So Venus and Aries, moving into a conjunction with the North Node, with Rahu. The thing that I always say is confusing and more. And so maybe we're just like going hard with our friendships and fun and pleasure and going for doing the fun stuff with people we love and just being really fun and boisterous and effervescent. Venus and Aries. Maybe we're overdoing it. So if you're feeling like you need to recharge, if you've done too much on the outside world and you need to come back and take a bath, please do that. The other things that could be going on, confusion in how we assert ourselves in relationship, or needing to be more careful or more mindful about what is happening relationally with people. Maybe this is us feeling extra amped up about our ethics, our morals, our values, and really wanting to say stuff. All of this stuff with the sun being with Rahu and then Venus being with Rahu, and it's in Aries, which is already very expressive. Mercury is going to be here this whole time, giving all of this stuff that's happening a microphone, a keyboard. So just making sure that are these processes that we want to do in private, or are these processes that we want to accidentally speak about and communicate about? The appropriate answer is dependent on the situation, but the words are around here. The communication is around here to bring out whatever is we're working through. So just be mindful about the words. Especially, one thing that I had mentioned on the last forecast with Mercury being with Chiron, something I'll say again is that words can be medicine, words can be poison. When I think about Chiron being the wounded healer, being this kind of physician, and so much how poison and medicine is one and the same. Our words can be poison. Our words can be medicine. Our words can create wounds. Our words can heal people from wounds. So which kind of side are we going to be on there if we can be mindful about what function our words are carrying internally as well? All of that applies. So shame is, depending on the context that we're looking at shame, in some small ways, it can be a protective influence in life. But most of the time, most of the shame that's going on is not helpful. It's not protective. It is just more wounding on wounding on wounding. And I think we very easily have come as a society, or not easily, but we've come to this notion as a society that shaming ourselves into change is not like the easiest path to that. Like if we want to make a change in ourselves, shaming ourselves into change, it tends to not work. It doesn't work that well with children. It doesn't work that well with adults. And it also does, I don't think it works with each other when we shame other people into change. So for instance, when I was a pharmacist and there would be people who were against vaccinations or vaccine hesitant, did I hit them on the head with a rolled up newspaper and say, you dum-dum, why aren't you thinking things like I'm thinking things? That like shaming people into thinking how I think and doing what I want them to do, that has never been a successful thing. And yet we still do it all the time. We do it to ourselves, we do it to each other. And I do kind of wonder how much this eclipse in Aries, Libra, the Mercury Chiron conjunctions happening, and then Venus being here and Libra being part of this, and that whole values and ethics and fairness and reciprocity, and are they putting in as much as I'm putting in, and all of these things. It can be pretty messy. So again, if we can just come back to, do I want the medicine out of this situation, or do I want to keep doing the self-flagellation in the form of shame? That could be another big old theme here. Venus with Rahu. Last thing I'll say about Venus and Rahu is when it comes to relationships, this is another great time. This is just all of April. Over communicate. Be specific about boundaries. Being kind is not the same as being nice. Venus sometimes can be about what is nice, like especially like, fake harmony Libra at worst, not saying Libra's about fake harmony, but at worst, I think it can be. Um, mm, there's there's this kind of resistance, I think, to asserting ourselves if we think that we're going to come off as mean. But being kind, like sometimes when you're kind, it is firm. It's like if you see one of the mm, there's this parable and it's Buddha talking to his cousin Rahula, I think. And they're talking about, when do I intervene? When do I say the thing to stop that other person? When is it skillful for me to actually assert myself or insert myself in this situation? And they gave the example of, well, if you saw a child with a rock in their mouth, would you not maybe even a little aggressively have to grab that child and scoop the rock out of their mouth? And might that child not feel a bit accosted and like, whoa, but all of that was kind. All of that was kind. It wasn't soft or nice, but it was totally necessary. So when we're thinking about relating and asserting ourselves and all of this stuff, just like thinking about that, like how necessary is it? And then when I'm doing it, what does kindness look like? And maybe it doesn't look like what everyone thinks it should look like. That honesty. I feel like Aries is so good at being honest. They just have like this raw honesty about them that, if you're going at that speed of life, you just don't have time. There's no time in Aries to worry about so much. And so they're just honest and raw. Like I feel like so much. And so in that, maybe that doesn't look nice, but maybe that is kind. It's so kind because then you see what people are about. No one's wasting any time. Everyone's on the same page. Like, all right, you're there doing that. I'm here doing this. And we all kind of know. And maybe it's not like soft or nice, warm and fuzzy, but all of that honesty is very kind, in that way that we set ourselves up for success, being more open and transparent, even if it's a little crunchy. So I think, okay, Venus getting with Rahu, some of those dynamics get a little twisted. So um, just doing our best, giving each other the benefit of the doubt, and Mercury's retrograde. So, toothpaste comes out of the tube, you can't get it back in. Horses get out of barns and then they don't come back. Cats get out of bags, etc. Plan accordingly. That's what I have to say about Venus and Rahu. I'm going to check in with the chat. Looks like I'm not having any other comments or questions. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time and your attention and being here and all your great contributions. I appreciate it. Last call, if anyone has any questions, anything they want to look at. Otherwise, I'm going to see if I have any final thoughts. Next time, have I picked? I have not picked. No, I have. Okay, next forecast for April, part 2, 12:30. No, sorry, 1 p.m. Central Time on the 10th of April. Did I really do it during that? I might reschedule that. Hold on. TBD. I think I'm not, I need to elect a better time. Okay. Stay tuned for when I'm doing April part 2, but it's going to be the second week of April. And then I definitely, because this is just always happening at the same time, second Thursday of the month, this is going to be April, Thursday, the 11th, 7 p.m. Central Time. I have my office hours here that I've been doing. I think this is my 3rd year doing office hours. For a long time, I did them in like a private membership kind of little room space. And then I brought it onto YouTube. But I think this is year 3. Now I call it question and response because I feel like it takes a little bit of pressure off of me. I don't always have the answer. But if you want to come to that, that is on the 11th. Come hang out with me and other astrology nerds, 7 p.m. Central Time, same bat place, same bat channel here on my YouTube channel. Yeah, those are all the announcements that I have. Best way to support me, get a reading, use my sliding scale if you have to. If you have any questions, comment below, send me an email. I hope everyone has a really great roller coaster. I hope everyone, gets into the upright and seat belted in position for the next 2 weeks ahead. benefits of the doubt all around. Don't overschedule yourself, over communicate, under promise, overperform, um, hydrate. And on the eclipse on the 8th, on the Mercury Cazimi on the 11th, write down any good ideas that you have. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Let me just check in one last time with the chat, make sure there wasn't anything else. Nope. That is it. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care, and I will see you in about 10 days.